Okay, so talking about sleep, we talked a bit about REM sleep and restorative sleep. REM sleep being dream sleep that we require more and more of. The more anxious we become, the more depressed we become. And so people who are anxious and depressed and perhaps dealing with other mental difficulties can often feel exhausted all the time, and there's a terrible demand on them to have little cat naps during the day. Can I say to you, if that's you, please, 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 don't have too many cat naps during the day. It can become a real vicious circle where you're robbing yourself of restful sleep at night, and then you can't get back into a normal sleep cycle. So if you are super exhausted during the day, best thing to do, have a little cat nap, but set an alarm for it, and do not be sleeping for more than 40-45 minutes during the day, max, really. Okay, so a healthy person will have different cycles of restorative and REM sleep. During the course of, say, an 8-hour sleep, they'll start off with a little bit of restorative sleep to prepare them for the first dream session, and then they'll dream for maybe half an hour, and then a bit more restorative sleep, and then a bit more dream sleep. And it goes like that through the night until the early hours of the morning, where they're having much longer periods of REM sleep. And this is why if you're waking up before you've had 8 hours sleep, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because although you've had enough probably restorative sleep, you haven't had that last really nice period of REM sleep where your brain can lay down new learning and help you remember things you're trying to remember and deal with difficult things that have happened during the day and that sort of thing. We absolutely must have REM sleep. I know sometimes when I'm talking about this, it can sound like REM sleep's the enemy, but REM sleep is desperately, desperately important. So actually, REM sleep is so important in laying down these sort of pattern matching templates, these human being programs, if you like, that we need it more and more and more the younger we are. It's thought that babies in the womb are actually in REM sleep a lot of the time, and that's how they can come out of the womb and know how to find something to suck. They know how to find a nipple to suck, and they've already laid down all these templates that they need. In fact, other animals, even more so than human beings, you know, deer and things like this, we've all seen Bambi, where Bambi's having to learn to walk within a few minutes of getting out of the womb, and that's because deer have laid down all these patterns already in REM sleep in the womb. And of course, our children need to sleep for huge periods as more and more patterns for life, more and more programs are being laid down, and of course their bodies are having to grow and get used to different body schemes, all sorts of things like this. But then once we hit the age of about sort of 14 to 20, our REM sleep starts to tail off, and so into adulthood we need much less REM sleep than we needed as an infant. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I'm not going to major on circadian rhythms today, other than to talk about that all people, even blind people, have a circadian rhythm that is reset every 24 hours by light and dark, and that kind of governs all sorts of things, your sense of where you are in the day, so that you don't feel jet lagged all the time. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced jet lag, where the body's struggling to catch up with that we're now in a different place on planet Earth. It regulates, circadian rhythm regulates things like our appetite and when we feel hungry, when we feel it's time to eat. And it's set by light and dark. So I'm not going to major on that too much. It's all to do with a little function of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a great one if you're playing Scrabble and you get a triple word score. That's fantastic to do. But it basically just sits over the optic nerve, watching for light and dark and resetting our circadian rhythm every day. And that's why it's so important. So the takeaway is really, really important. Just allow yourself to see natural daylight, and as the darkness starts to come, allow your lights to dim down. Don't be giving yourselves lots of unnatural night. And of course, we're surrounded, aren't we, by tablets, by flat screen TVs, by phones, by lights, by, oh my goodness, so many things competing to rob us of this natural circadian rhythm reset. So try and, if you're struggling with sleep, try and allow lights to kind of dim down in the last few hours of the day. Try and stay off screens for a couple of hours before you You go, okay, I'm just going to look at my notes. So there's all sorts of things that we do to try and argue with our circadian rhythm, isn't there? Modern life is full of them. So oh my goodness, coffee, I love coffee, but coffee doesn't love me. Coffee's a big one. So coffee works by, if you can imagine that there's in the brain, when it's time to sleep, melatonin's released, which is sort of the starter pistol, if you like, for the race of getting to sleep, which is a counterintuitive way of explaining it. But then another neurotransmitter called adenosine is released, and the more adenosine is taken up by the brain, the more sleepy we become, until very quickly we fall off to sleep. So coffee works by blocking and covering over the brain's adenosine receptors. So it doesn't matter how much adenosine you've got in the brain, and it keeps building up and building up and building up this pressure to sleep. If you had coffee and caffeine, it blocks the receptors. The brain isn't able to uptake that adenosine, and so you stay awake. But of course, what happens when you're up all night cramming for an exam or something like that, and you're drinking coffee, eventually the caffeine half-life decays, and then all this tidal wave of adenosine hits your brain, and you completely crash, and then you're out. And so that's the thing with coffee. I can't really show you on this. I might try and import some pictures into this later on, but back in the bad old days of psychology, when they were giving grants out to psychologists to do any sort of study, oh my goodness, they had some that managed to get a grant to give spiders psychoactive substances. Don't even ask me how they managed that. I don't know. Did they give it into the spiders in food? Did they give the spiders spliffs? What happened? What happened to the spiders? But they did. And they then recorded the webs that the spiders made. And you can very easily Google this. Just Google spiders' webs on drugs or something like that, and it will give you the images. And they did a control web, and the webs just get more and more bizarre. And you think, oh gosh, which substance was this? Do you know what the most bonkers web was due to? Which subject the spider was, subjected to? Which substance, I beg your pardon, the spider was subjected to? It wasn't LSD, it wasn't marijuana, it wasn't PCP, it was caffeine. Oh my goodness, the spider that was up all night drinking coffee out of a little tiny spider cup. Woo! The web was bizarre, bonkers. You can go and look at it. So caffeine's a very, very powerful drug that we have allowed ourselves in modern life. Other things we do to argue with our circadian rhythm: lights, we talked about it, tablets, screens, alarm clocks, and oh my goodness, if we're struggling with sleep, we do often hit the wine bottle, and wine or alcohol, I should say, in a tiny moderation can be very, very helpful, but very quickly with sleep, it starts to rob us actually of restful sleep, because although it will knock us out, what's happening is our liver has to work so hard to process all that alcohol during the night. So we talked about how excessive REM sleep can be exhausting. Oh my goodness, having to churn through all those units of alcohol is so exhausting for your body. Anything more than 1 or 2 units. And it's like, airports, when they have so many planes coming, stacking up, trying to land, and it takes air traffic control so much longer to land them all. It's very much like that with excessive alcohol in the liver. The more units of alcohol there are, the longer it takes your body to process them. So usually a body will process about 1 unit of alcohol an hour, and that's not a lot. That's about half a pint. So the more units we've got in there to knock ourselves out, the more work the body's having to do during the night, the liver, as it processes all through this alcohol, and the more exhausted we are when we wake up the next day. Okay.